Hi everyone, and welcome to Top Team Testing. In this series, I go over a recently successful team and analyze its strengths, weaknesses, and common game plans through the lens of several replays, including a best of 3. After one 15-minute video, you should feel comfortable bringing this team to a local tournament, and how to approach playing against this team if you run into it on the ladder. This week, we're featuring a team that DayDay used to win a Chinese tournament hosted by Jolly Breloom, as well as get top 24 in the North American Players' Cup. The team features several Pokemon that have overperformed in the Players' Cup that I wanted to highlight. The most notable one of those Pokemon is Nihilego, which has burst into the metagame and isn't going anywhere. It utilizes Meteor Beam, which is a charge-up move that boosts its special attack turn 1, and then does a ton of Rock-type damage turn 2. By using a Power Herb, it gets the boost and attacks on the same turn, and with Beast Boost, it can continue to stack these special attack boosts. While many Nihilego opt to run Power Gem for a secondary Rock Stab, this one uses Dazzling Gleam to hit opposing Urshifu. Nihilego has proven to be a very strong partner for Dragapult, which fills the same roles it did in Series 2, and 3, and 4, and 5. This format is a little too fast for it to click Dragon Dance consistently, but its Fast Max Airstream is still an incredible enabler for a number of Pokemon. Choice Band Urshifu also benefits from the speed boosts, as well as the Max Phantasm defense drops. Cobra Berry and Moongus allows these powerful attackers to exert pressure, even when your opponent manages to get speed control, while also acting as a defensive pivot and Trick Room deterrent. It has strong defensive synergy with another overperforming Pokemon from the Players' Cup, Rotom Heat. Rotom has unique resistances and coverage that allows it to be a pain for many common Dynamax Pokemon. Unfortunately, it doesn't do very much damage after its first attack, but Will-O-Wisp and Ally Switch make it a real nuisance when positioned correctly. Finally, this team shows that Glastrier doesn't really need Trick Room to shine. Depending on the game plan, the big bundle of stats can either Dynamax in the mid-game, win late-game damage trades or, with its Assault Vest, act as a defensive pivot. Naturally, it also benefits from the defense drops from Max Phantasm. This team generally opts to Dynamax Dragapult, Glastrier, or Nihilego. It usually exerts Dynamax pressure turn 1, but has the defensive pivots to allow your opponent to commit and then overwhelm them with a mid-game Dynamax, depending on what the leads look like. With that, let's get into the games. Our first game shows off the power of Nihilego paired with Dragapult. Our opponent leads Thundurus and Urshifu into our Nihilego and Dragapult, and we both Dynamax our Max Airstream users. We go for an Airstream into Urshifu, dropping it down to its dash, and the speed boost means Nihilego can finish it off with a Dazzling Gleam before it can move. Thundurus goes for its own Max Airstream, which does a little under half to Dragapult, and then they bring in their Glastrier. It threatens a lot of damage, but smartly protects as we go for an Airstream and a Meteor Beam into it. Thankfully, we still get the special attack boost from Meteor Beam even though it attacks into Protect. They go for another Airstream into Dragapult, which doesn't quite knock it out. Next turn, we double the Glacier once again with the Airstream and a Sludge Bomb, and this time we do get the knockout. But their third Airstream finally picks up the KO on the Dragapult. But at this point, Nihilego is set. Our Urshifu is met by their Tapu Fini, but Nihilego lives the superpower and easily KOs the Tapu Fini with a boosted Sludge Bomb. From there, Choice Band Poison Jab knocks out the weakened Thundurus and wins the game. This replay shows that Glastrier is still bonkers, especially when your opponent has so many other threats they have to account for. We lead Rotom and Glastrier into their Spectrier and Whimsicott, and it's time to start horsing around. We both Dynamax our horses, and they go for a Helping Hand and a Max Phantasm to KO the Rotom. We go for a Max Quake into the Spectrier to start stacking some special defense boosts and getting some damage off. We bring in our Nihilego, and they go for a Tailwind and a Max Quake of their own to immediately knock it out. But we get to go for a Max Hailstorm, which KOs the Glastrier and gives us the attack boost. Our last Pokemon is Urshifu, and they bring in a Tapu Fini. Fini protects, while Whimsicott knocks out the Urshifu with a Moonblast, and we go for another Max Quake, this time into the Fini, getting a second special defense boost. It's now Glastrier versus the world. They go for a Moonblast with Whimsicott and Calm Mind with the Tapu Fini, as we KO the Whimsicott with our most accurate move, Heavy Slam. They bring in their last Pokemon, a Rotom Heat. They go for an Overheat, and they also get a critical hit on the Dazzling Gleam, and yet we're still left with a quarter of our health. High Horsepower gets a KO on Tapu Fini, and they go for a Nasty Plot as Close Combat KOs the Rotom to complete the 4v1. While this team has some defensive pivots, it relies on them being well positioned into this metagame's offensive threats. In this game, our opponent leads Lycanroc and Tyranitar into our Urshifu and Glastrier. They Dynamax the Tyranitar as we max our horse, and they go for a Rock Slide and flinch the Urshifu. The Max Knuckle brings the Urshifu down to low health, and our Hailstorm does very little damage to the Tyranitar, but we know the Lycanroc is Focus Sash from previous games, and so we wanted to break that right away. Sucker Punch doesn't quite pick up the Lycanroc, and the combination of Rock Slide and Max Rock Ball knock out the Glastrier. Amoonguss and Rotom are not winning this endgame without a whole bunch of misses. They get a flinch on another Rock Slide, and we quickly concede. This team puts on immediate offensive pressure with almost any lead. We've seen a few examples of how that translates to an immediate Dynamax win, but this game showcases how that pressure can be pivoted into a mid-game Dynamax that's a little more reactive. Our opponent leads Kartana and Clefable into our Urshifu and Nihilego. We immediately switch Nihilego out into Rotom and they follow me. Their Airstream doesn't KO the Urshifu, telling us that it's Assault Vest, and it allows us to chunk the Clefable with close combat. More importantly, they're forced to follow me again, picking up a KO with Max Knuckle as we chip down the Clefable with Thunderbolt. We bring in our Nihilego, but we Dynamax the Rotom. We protect Nihilego and they go for a helping hand, not a follow me. Knuckle does about half damage to this Dynamax Rotom, which means it would have KO'd if we hadn't Dynamax, but in this case, we get a Max Flare off and KO the Kartana. Gastrodon comes in, and we switch into Glastrier to preserve the Nihilego. Rotom KOs Clefable, and Gastrodon's helping hand boosted attack does very little to our Assault Vest Glastrier. They bring in a Rotom, go for a Nasty Plot and a Scald, as we double up into the Gastrodon, just barely missing the KO, but it gets the Citrus Berry recovery back. Our Dynamax ends, and they go for a Protect onto Gastrodon as we double it again. This time, Glastrier dodges the Overheat, but they're still protected from Overheat and Icicle Crash, so no damage is done. We once again trade Overheats. At this time, we do trade KOs. We bring in Nihilego, which Rotom has no way to deal with, and they concede. Let's wrap it up with a best of 3. We're playing against a Metagross Feeny team with Incineroar, Porygon 2, Tornadus, and Thundurus. They lead Tornadus and Metagross as we lead Dragapult and Amoonguss, and there really aren't any safe plays for either of us. They switch Metagross out into Porygon 2 and taunt the Amoonguss, which we punish with a Max Phantasm and a Clear Smog, which knocks out the Tornadus. Incineroar comes in for them, and we switch our taunted Amoonguss out into Nihilego. They Dynamax their Porygon 2, which has a special attack boost, and our Max Wormwind does about a third damage to it. They go for a Max Phantasm of their own, which reveals Shadow Ball, and does a little over half damage to Dragapult, while the Flare Blitz chunks the Nihilego. They switch their Metagross in, but we had a really safe pin on that slot, so Max Phantasm picks up the KO on the Metagross, and Meteor Beam, which would have gone into the Incineroar, redirects to the Porygon 2 and misses. They go for a Max Lightning into the Nihilego, but they can't knock it out. Incineroar comes in, and we protect on the Fake Out and Dragon Darts, and they Max Lightning into the Nihilego. At this point, the game's pretty much over. We just have to put damage into slots. We do just that, and we win the game. In Game 2, they lead their Genies into Rotom and Nihilego. They switch into Metagross while we switch into Amoonguss, and they get a Tailwind up, but we get a Will-O-Wisp off into the Metagross, neutering it significantly. Amoonguss protects as they Air Slash their Rotom and go for a Rock Slide, which pays off for them with a flinch. Now they get to taunt the Amoonguss and go for another Rock Slide, which this time procs our Citrus Berry. We go for a Thunderbolt into the Tornadus, which procs their Awakened Berry and does very little. And then they flinch the Amoonguss, which is the relatively less impactful one. We switch Amoonguss out into Nihilego, and they go for a Brutal Swing to proc their Weakness Policy, and then yet another Rock Slide, which does a decent chunk of damage to both Pokemon. We get a Thunderbolt off, which KOs the Tornadus on the last turn of Tailwind, but they bring in their Thundurus. They go for a Dynamax, and we protect the Nihilego. They Airstream the Rotom to knock it out, and then they go for an Iron Head into our Protect. Maybe, just maybe, Nihilego can still do this. Amoonguss comes in and goes for a Rage Powder, and tanks an Airstream with its Copa Berry, but then, unfortunately, faints to the Iron Head, as Meteor Beam gets to charge up on a special attack, but doesn't quite KO the Metagross. Metagross does get knocked out by its burn, but their last Pokemon is Tapu Fini against our Urshifu, and we need to max the Nihilego to pull this back, but all of our Pokemon just get KO'd. So, let's move on to Game 3. We have the same leads as last game, and just like last game, they once again switch to Metagross. We hadn't revealed Ally Switch yet, so I go for it, and they taunt what is now a Nihilego. We go for a Meteor Beam into the Metagross and do a cool 50% damage. We Dynamax the Rotom, and they protect the Metagross and go for a Tailwind. Sludge Bomb does about 70% to Tornadus, and Max Flare procs Metagross's Weakness Policy, but does do about 40% through Protect. Next turn, they go for an Air Slash into Nihilego and a Rock Slide, and they get the flinch. And Rotom takes out the Metagross with another Max Flare. Thundurus comes in and immediately goes for a Dynamax into Max Knuckle, which KOs the Nihilego. They also get some chip onto the Rotom with an Air Slash from the Tornadus. We go for a Max Flare from Rotom for the third turn in a row, this time doing a little over half damage to Thundurus. We bring in Amoonguss, and they switch to Feeding to give it the Max Airstream boost. We go for a Rage Powder, and we live the boosted Max Airstream with the Koba Berry, which allows us to knock out the Thundurus with an Overheat. They go back into the Tornadus and go for a Moonblast and an Air Slash as we Thunderbolt the Feeny. I don't Thunderbolt the Tornadus because I figured the Glacier in the back might just need the attack boost to deal with this endgame. They go for a Muddy Water, which KOs the Rotom, and an Air Slash, which flinches the Glacier. We can still do this. They go for a Muddy Water and an Air Slash, and they get a critical hit, and they get a flinch, and they win the game. Well, that was painful. But let's go over what we learned. The team utilizes 4 strong offensive Pokemon that all have surprising synergy. Dragapult provides Airstream boosts for Urshifu and Nihilego, and Phantasm boosts for Urshifu and Glacier, while also benefiting from Amoonguss next to it. Even without Trick Room support, Glacier does everything, offensively and defensively. Heck, it might even do your taxes. Choice Band Urshifu punishes protecting in front of all this offensive pressure. The two of those together are probably the strongest damage traders in the entire format. Nihilego really pulls this team together. It threatens the fairies that annoy Dragapult and Urshifu, and Meteor Beam threatens the fires for Glacier and Amoonguss, while also helping you win your Airstream wars by hitting those pesky flying types. The fact that so many games in this format turn into teams clicking Airstream 3 times makes having a powerful rock attacker very valuable and very well positioned in the metagame. Rotom Heat is the other Pokemon that really picked up in usage just prior to Players' Cup. It is a Swiss Army microwave. If you think about the common Dynamax Pokemon in the format, be it Glacier or Kartana or Thundurus or Metagross or Moltres or Tapu Fini, it really does have ways to pressure all of them. However, it often doesn't do enough against them or takes a little too much damage back. So with Ally Switch and Will-O-Wisp, this Rotom has more of a supportive role, doing damage when it can, but mostly soaking up damage for your team and stalling out those threatening Dynamaxes. Overall, this team is very powerful. Every game I played felt winnable, and my losses could easily be traced back to a misplay or getting flinched to death. However, one weakness of this team is that its bulk is very precisely tailored towards threats in the metagame. Nihilego is not a bulky Pokemon, but the omnipresence of Max Airstream allows it to take hits. Same with Rotom Heat with respect to Steel and Ice and Flying moves. However, there are certain types this team doesn't really want to take attacks from. Water types are problematic if they also aren't exactly a fairy type like Tapu Fini. Similarly, this team has 1 rock resist and is not exactly bulky, that being Urshifu, making it really hard to beat a well-positioned rock type like Stakataka, opposing Nihilego, Colossal, and apparently Lycanroc. That being said, this team felt very strong into the current metagame and is a good showcase of what threats like Nihilego, Dragapult, and Rotom can do. I strongly recommend you try it out, and there are links to do so in the description. And while you're scrolling down there, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, I'll catch you all later.